haba ng introduction. Okay, and so our first module for this week is all about truth values of propositions. So if you can still remember, we have discussed the different logical operators last week, and as what I have told you, kailangan na ma-memorize ninyo yon, or kung hindi nyo man sila memorize, at least you have to be familiar with all those logical operators. Because with this topic, with this week's topic, ay gagamitin talaga natin yan. And you cannot formulate your truth table if you do not know the different logical operators. Okay? So with the first module, you are expected to construct truth tables of propositions. So yan ang sinasabi ko, that if you do not, if you're not familiar with the different logical operators, then you cannot construct the truth tables. And then you need to determine the truth values of the propositions. And lastly, you need to distinguish the proposition, whether it is tautology or contradiction. So another term for contradiction is fallacy. Okay, so to start, let us have first a recall of what we had last time. Okay, so anyone can answer, huh? So let's have the first table. So if you have the proposition P and its negation, so what do you think will be the negation of P if it is true? Yes, Lance?
False po, ma'am.
How about the second one? If the proposition P is false, what is its negation?
True po.
Okay, it's true. And that is the first logical operator, which is known as the negation. Ano po? So remember the symbol, yung medyo paalon, syempre, if your first proposition is true, its negation, the negative of it, the opposite of it actually is false. If it is false, then it is true. Okay, so that's the first logical operator, which is the easiest. Okay, so how about this one? Anyone wants to complete the second table? And a volunteer for this? Yes, Shallow? Shallow. So what do you think?
The first one po is true.
Okay.
The second one po is false.
Okay.
False and false.
Yan. And how do you call this logical operator?
Conjunction po.
Okay, it's a conjunction. Yan. Okay. So remember this symbol. Okay. How do you read this symbol nga, Shello?
And po.
Yan. N. Okay. Or the conjunction of P and Q. The conjunction of P and Q are this one. Okay. So remember that in conjunction, the only true propositions for P and Q, for the conjunction of P and Q, is that if both P and Q are true. Ano po? Yun lang. Dun lang siya nagtutrue. Okay. Let's have the third table. Anyone? Yes, Uriel?
First one po, true. Second po ay true. Third po ay true. And last po ay false.
And how do you call this logical operator?
Disjunction po.
Okay, so this is just the opposite of the conjunction, di ba? Okay, and this symbol is read as what, Uriel?
Or po.
Yan, or. So kapag ang ginamit is or, then we have the disjunction. And the only false proposition for the disjunction of P and Q is that if they are both false. Ano? So kabaliktara naman ng conjunction. Ang only true ay kapag parehas sila na true. Okay po yan? So that's the disjunction. Okay? Let's have the fourth table. Yes, Ariane?
The first po ay true.
Okay.
Second is false.
Okay.
Third is
Okay.
true. And
Yan. And how do you call this logical operator?
conditional.
It's conditional. Okay? How about this symbol? Anong basa natin dito?
If P, then Q, or P implies Q.
Okay, that's correct, Ariane. Thank you. Okay, so the way we read this is if P, then Q, or just simply P, then Q. Ano po? The symbol. Okay? So dito naman, for the conditional, the only false proposition is that if P is true and Q is false. Okay po? But the rest, all true na sila. Okay? And the last logical operator, yes, Margaret?
The first table po, ma'am, is true. The second table po is false. Third po ay false. fourth po is true.
How do you call this?
Biconditional po.
Biconditional. And how do you read this symbol?
P if and only if P.
Ulit, Margaret. P.
P if and only Q.
Kulang. Dalawa yung dalawa doon yung letter F. IFF. What's the meaning of IFF? P.
P if and only F Q.
Yan. P if and only if Q. Ano po? Yan. So that's the biconditional. So sa biconditional naman ay kapag pares na true or false sila, dun lang nagtutrue. The rest, basta may isang proposition na nag-false, false na. Sa conditional, false lang kapag ka nauna ay true and then false yung pangalawang proposition. So again, you need to be familiar with all these logical operators for us to form the truth table, okay, of different propositions. So ano ba yung sinasabi natin na truth value? When we say truth value, it refers to the truthfulness of a proposition that may either be true or false. Okay? So with the use of the truth table, we will be able to know the truth value of the different propositions. And again, it can either be true or false. And of course, when we have this truth table, it shows the complete possible truth values of a proposition. You need to show all the solution or all the different ways by which you arrived at the truthfulness or the falsity of the given propositions. So how do we do that? Yeah, let's have this example number 1. Suppose P and Q are both false propositions and R is a true proposition. Determine the truth value of P and the negation of Q and P and Q. Okay, so as you can see here with our operation, it only involves the propositions P and Q. Okay po? And so for our table, yan, you will just need to start with P and Q. Diba? For P, we have 2 true and then 2 false. Then the Q, TF, TF. Then, as you can see here, we need to have another column for the negation of Q. That's why we have here the negation of Q. So if Q is true, then its negation is false. If it is false, then it's true. Same with if it is true, then it is false. If it is false, then it's true. Then the next operation to perform is the one on the first parenthesis, which is P and the negation of Q. So meaning you need to look for, okay, wait lang po, kasi I cannot see the annotation. Yeah. So as you can see here, you just need to look for or to compare these 2 columns. Okay? You need to get the conditional of these 2 columns. And anong sabi natin kanina doon sa recall natin? Sa conditional, sa conjunction po pala, sorry. Sa conjunction, the only true proposition is that if they are both true. Diba? Okay, so kung titingnan natin, if P is true and the negation of Q is false, then it's false. So dito lang siya sa dalawang true na to magto-true, all the rest is false. Okay po? And then the next operation is to perform the conjunction of P and Q. For this one naman, para bang you are following the GEMDAS rule. Parang ganun ano. So yun yung ginagawa natin dito sa forming the truth table of propositions. So kukunin natin yung conjunction ni P and Q. So we will look at these 2 columns naman. So sa 2 columns, again, the only true proposition is that if the conjunction of P and Q ay true kapag both ay true. So kaya yan po siya. Okay? Then lastly, saka ninyo ipe-perform yung whole operation. Yan. So ito ng dalawang columns na to ang titingnan nyo. So sa 2 columns na yan, di ba sabi natin, magtutrue lang siya if they are both true. But since wala tayong makitang column dito na parehas na true, then that means lahat ng rows po natin for the whole operation of P and the negation of Q and P and Q are all false. Nasundan po yun? kung paano mag-form ng truth table? Anyone?
Opo, ma'am.
Opo.
Ayan. Okay. So if in case, the truth values of the given propositions are all false, then ang tawag po natin doon is a contradiction. Okay? Contradiction or fallacy. Kasi false di ba? So when we say contradiction or fallacy, that's another term. That is when the truth value of the proposition is always false. So as you can see naman with the first example, walang naligaw na true, di ba? So lahat sila ay false. And this contradiction or fallacy is symbolized by this symbol or yung ginagamit natin sa subsets na empty set, di ba? Yan. So kapag daw po yan yung nakita nyo, it means na lagi siyang false. Never siyang magto-true. Okay po? Any question with the first example? None? Okay. So let's proceed with the next example. Siyempre, kung yung first table natin ay all false, we'll try to show yung all true naman ang lalabas. Okay? So let us assume that P and Q are two propositions. Determine the truth value of P. If P, then Q, then the negation of P or Q. Construct its truth table. So basically, the two propositions are just P and Q. So you need to start again with the first two columns that we had with the first example. Okay? And same values of T and F also. Okay po? Yan. So ito yung dalawang yon. And then performing this first operation, which is the if-then statement. So sa if-then statement natin or sa conditional, so alin lang doon yung nagiging false? So nagiging false lang siya if P is true and Q is false. So that's why in this column, ito lang po yun, the if-then. Okay? And then with the second operation, you need to have first your negation of P. So since this is your P column, you have to negate this. So meaning the negation of true is F, T, and T. Okay? The next operation to perform is to find the disjunction of the negation of P and Q. And so for that, sabi natin, for the disjunction, the only false proposition is that if they are both false, right? So saan lang ba nagkaroon ng false? Si negation of P. So bawal mabaliktad mga anak ha. So since the operation is here is the negation of P before Q, so you need to look at this column. Yan, dito muna kayo sa column na to. Then you try to disjunct the values of the negation of P with this column. So F and T is true. So dito lang siya magpo-false. Kapag dalawang false, all the rest is true na. Okay po? And then lastly, the whole operation na po ang ating ipa-perform. Okay, the if-then or the conditional of the two propositions na natin. So, since siya ay conditional ulit, so hanapin lang natin, so ibig sabihin alin yung i-compare natin ng column. This column at saka itong column na to. Ano, kasi ito po yung tinutukoy natin, oh. Yan. Ito na yung ipa-perform natin and then the conditional of that with the next operation, which is this one. Kaya yun pong two columns na yun ang kailangan natin i-perform. Ano po? So sabi natin doon, magpo-false lang siya. Nasaan na? Clear ko lang. O, bawal mabaliktad ulit ha. Okay? So sa conditional natin, conditional nga yan ano. So mag-false lang siya if P then Q is true and the negation of P or Q ay false. So meron ba tayo nun? T dito and then F dito sa kabila. Okay, so check natin. Wala. Ano? So ibig sabihin, hindi siya mag-false yung proposition. That means lahat sila ay true. So walang naligaw na false proposition. And if all propositions are true, then they are called as tautology, which is denoted by symbol or yung tau Greek letter tau, okay, denoted by tau if the truth value of the proposition which is always true. If it is always false, then we have the contradiction or fallacy. If it is always true, then we have a tautology. Okay po. Question with the second example?
Wala po.
Okay, let's try this one. Let P and Q be propositions. Determine the truth values of P and the negation of Q and P and Q. So by looking at the propositions, how many columns must your truth table have? Anyone? Ilang kayang columns ang kailangan nating i-provide? Yes, Francine? Francine? Parang walang mic si Francine. Tingnan natin ang chat ni Francine. 6 daw. Totoo? Tama ba na 6 columns?
Opo, kasama po yung sasagot.
Yung last. Ano? So we should have the P column, the Q column, the negation of Q, the P and the negation of Q column, the P and Q column, and the whole P and the negation of Q and P and Q column. Tama? Yan. So we must have 6 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's supply the correct answer for each blank. So what do you think must be the title of this column?
Negation of Q.
Okay, it must be the negation of Q. Thank you, Lance. Okay, so for the negation of Q, what should be in the next blank?
True po.
Napapasayo ako dyan, Lance, sa tugtog mo. It's true. Okay, for the next operation, yung P and the negation of Q. So P and the negation of Q, sabi natin for the conjunction, kapag si P ay true and si negation of Q ay false, so ang conjunction nila ay
False po.
okay,
False po.
false. Yan, thank you. Okay, so yun lang po yun sa column natin na yun. Let's have the 5th column. For the conjunction of P and Q, ito lang yun. If P is false and Q is true, then what do you think is the conjunction of the two?
False po, ma'am.
False.
If false, yan. And the next blank for that column, ano din dapat to?
False po.
Okay, false din. Diba? Kasi sabi nga natin sa conjunction, only true lang kapag sila ay parehas na true. Okay? And for the last column natin, the title of the column must be the whole operation. Yun po yun. Okay? So, alin ay ko-compare natin? Itong dalawa. So, remember, conjunction pa rin yan. So, hanapin nyo lamang yung parehas na true. Yan. Wala namang parehas na true. Ano? Oh, walang parehas na true. So, ibig sabihin, lahat sila ay false. So, that means this is an example of what?
Contradiction po.
Contradiction or fallacy. Okay? Question for the first module? None? I hope none, ano? Okay, let's proceed with the second module, which is all about logical equivalence and conditional propositions. Okay, and with this module, this is module 17, I think, okay, you are expected to achieve the following objectives: illustrate the different forms of conditional propositions, verify the logical equivalences, state the converse, contrapositive, and inverse of a conditional proposition, and lastly, clarify a real-life situation or instance using logical equivalence and conditional propositions. So what do you mean by logical equivalence? From the word equivalent, diba? Okay, so for the logical equivalence, for two propositions P and Q, they are said to be logically equivalent if they have the same values in the truth table and if the biconditional is a tautology. Okay, so very clear po yan ha. The biconditional must be a tautology, not a fallacy or a contradiction. And in symbols, logically equivalent is symbolized by this. So magkaiba po ito ha sa if and only if natin and then sa logical equivalent. So sa logical equivalent parang na doble. Okay po? Or if you do not want to use this symbol, then you can have these 3 lines parang sa equal sign natin. So this is read as P is logical equivalent to Q. Okay? Let's try to have this example. Yan. So as you can see, so logical equivalence talaga yung gagamitin natin because of this symbol. Ano po? So we need to show that if P then Q is logically equivalent to the negation of P and Q. Okay, so I hope you know how to read na the different symbols for propositions. So with that one, so kailangan natin yung columns natin, yung truth table natin. Okay po? We need to see whether they are really logically equivalent. So we need to establish our column for P and Q, and then if then statement for P and Q, and then the negation of P, and then lastly this one. Okay? So ang kailangan natin mapakita dito is that this column, if P then Q column is really the same for the negation of P and Q. Okay? So establishing this column, sabi nga natin sa if then or sa conditional, the only false proposition is that if P is true and Q is false. So, ibig sabihin itong pangalawa lamang ang false. All the rest, ay wait lang. Hindi pala tayo pala magsusupply ng ano po. Yan. Wait lang. Okay, so kung pag sinupplyan na natin, true, it's, tama ba? Okay. Then since TF lang yun lang yung magiging false, then all the rest ay true na. Okay. So that's the conditional of P and Q. Then let's have the negation of P pala, sorry. Negation of P. Anong magiging answer natin dito? It will be F, false, true. Nasusundan po ba yon? Ito yung ninegate natin na column ha, yung P. And then ito na tayo, titingnan natin yung conjunction nitong column ng negation of P and then Q. Sabi natin sa conjunction, magiging false lang siya. Ang true lang sa kanya if they are both true. So F, T, F, T, F, tama ba sa conjunction? Ano? So ito ay magiging false. Saan ba ako tumitingin? FT. Okay, nasa na itong F na to at saka yung T, then it is false. Then, what else? F and then F, it's false again. T and T, it's true. And then true and false is F. Yan. Okay, so are they logical equivalent? Tama bang ginawa ni ma'am? T, F, T, T. Okay, F, F, T, F. Okay, logical equivalent ba yon? Yung if P then Q natin with the negation of P or Q.
No
And
po.
Q pala. And Q. Okay, so it's no. Tama ba? Yun yung lumabas. Pero, ano gagawin natin? With the use of the different, ay, wait lang. Clear ko lang. Table of logical equivalences, pwede po nating mapakita. Ay, paano gagawin natin? Ano yung table of logical equivalence na sinasabi ko? Okay? So, ito po yon. Hindi ko na isa-isahin na. Yan yung mga names. So, paano tayo tumitingin kapag ganyan? So, titingnan nyo lamang sa column na to. Yan. So, this is the tau symbol ha. yung mga given. Okay? So katulad dun sa kanina natin, di ba, yung first natin is that if P then Q, so tingnan nyo na kaagad kung ano yung law na pwede nyo gamitin to establish the logical equivalence. So if P then Q, dito tayo pwedeng sumuot. Ano? Is equivalent to, kaya lang iba yung kanyang nandito sa kabilang side, hindi ba? Okay. So tingnan natin kung paano natin to gagamitin to establish the logical equivalence of the given propositions. Ito ba yung given natin kanina? Hindi ano? Iba ano mga anak? Yan. So, iba ito kaysa dun sa isang given natin. Ano? So, paano natin establish yung logical equivalence ng negation of P then Q is logical equivalent to P and the negation of Q. So, sabi ko nga sa inyo, we need to use the different laws, okay, for the table of equivalences. So, unang-una, let's start with this one. Ang gagamitin lang po muna natin is ito ha, ito yung gagalawin natin. And once na ginalaw natin yung nasa left side, kailangan ito yung magiging last result natin para masabi natin that they are really equivalent. Okay po? So ito lang side na to ang gagalawin natin. And kapag ginagalaw natin siya, titingnan ninyo sa ating table of logical equivalences. So basically, kapag ka daw may if-then statement, at dito po siya papasok. So meaning we need to use the Switcheroo law. Okay? Switcheroo law, which means that this one, if P then Q, is equivalent to the negation of P or Q. Okay? Hindi mo na gagalawin itong may bilog po ha. Okay? From the table, kinuha natin yung equivalent nitong nasa left side. And since may negation siya sa una, hindi pa rin siya nawawala. Ayun pa yung negation of the equivalent na nung nasa loob ng parenthesis natin, which is this one, according to Switcheroo law. Nasusundan po?
Opo.
Yan. Okay. And then, ang kasunod na natin, mula dito sa result ng sa Switcheroo law, saan siyang law pwedeng pumasok? Saan napapasok yung merong P or just yung kahit yung P or Q lang? So kung titingnan natin sa
De
table natin,
Morgan's law po.
yan, papasok siya sa De Morgan's law. Ito siya oh, yung P or Q. Okay? But then of course, we don't have to neglect the negation symbols na nasa unahan natin ha. Okay? Yan. So, ibig sabihin, itong P and Q natin, yan, the negation of P or Q is logically equivalent to the negation of P, okay, and the negation of Q. Okay? So, yung negation natin dito, ayun, yung nayon pa rin siya kay P, and then so yung Q natin, nilagay na natin doon. Okay po, that is according to De Morgan's law. Yung equivalent na yung kinuha natin ha. And then, since may double negative tayo dyan, ibig sabihin, ang gagamitin na natin is the double negation. So pagdating sa double negation, yan. Ito na po yung lumabas. Since yung negation natin is for this one lang, kay P, then hindi na sakop si Q. Yan. Ito na po siya. So ibig sabihin, ayan na. Napalabas na natin that P and the negation of Q is really logically equivalent to the negation of P then Q by using the different laws on logical equivalence. Okay po. Yeah. Meron pa ba akong isang example? Okay, let's try another one. Okay. In this case, saan kayo mas madaling makakapag-manipulate using yung different laws natin? Siyempre, as you can see, yung nasa left side, it's already simplified, kumbaga, di ba? Simplified na siya. Okay? Pero yung nasa right side, yun ang medyo mahaba pa na dito tayo pwedeng makapag-simplify. Yan. Okay? So looking at the the right side pala. The right side of the propositions natin. Yun ang kukunin natin ha. Ayan na siya. Okay? Ano yung saan siya pwedeng pumasok na law? Anyone?
De Morgan's Law po.
Okay, De Morgan's Law ulit. Bakit nawala ang aking ano ba? Yan. So sa De Morgan's Law, bakit siya napapasok sa De Morgan's Law? Because of this symbol, oh. Pagka may P or Q kayo, automatic, ayan na siya. Ito. Okay? So yung logical equivalent niya is the negation of P and the negation of Q. Okay? Kinuha natin yun na. Pero, yung negation symbol sa labas, nandun pa rin. Okay? So meron naman tayong parang grouping symbol. Okay? So, di ba pag sa grouping symbol natin, ibig sabihin, we need to distribute the negative sign dun sa nasa labas. Ano po? So, since dalawa yung negative sign natin, so gagamitin na ulit natin yung double negation law natin. And according to double negation law, parang i-distribute the negative sign kasi meron tayong grouping symbol eh. So, ibig sabihin, dun sa parehas na operation siya, kailangang i-distribute. Unlike nung kanina na nasa unahan lang siya nung negative P or negation of P. Okay po? Kaya nung dinistribute natin yung negation sa nasa unahan, so yung negation ng negation ni P is P and the negation of Q is Q. Okay? So kung mapapansin ninyo, we have just arrived with the one on the left side natin na P and Q. So that means they are really logical equivalent. Question. Yes, Lance.
Well, medyo nalilito po ako dun sa De Morgan's Law po na ginawa po dito. Diba po sabi po dun sa De Morgan's Law ay pagka negation of P or Q po, magiging negation of P and negation of Q po. Pero dito po sa una nating given, may negation na po ng P tapos may negation na po ng Q. Tapos nung De Morgan's Law po siya yung nasa loob po, di po ba magiging P and Q na po siya, mawawala na po yung negation po nito. Kasi, tapos tsaka po uli magkaka-negation gawa po nung sa labas.
Okay, dito sa De Morgan's Law, negation of P or Q. Okay? Kung titingnan natin dito, di ba they are both negative? Parang sa pagsisimplify ba natin ng negative integers, that if they are both negative, pwede siyang it's also equivalent to parang negative of the quantity P or Q. Yan siya. Lance. Since they are both negative. Ano? Yan po yung naging basis natin. Lance. Para lang siyang yung parang ginagamit din natin siya, instead of having numbers, letters lang ng propositions yung nandito. Pero with the application of the parang operations, yung logical operators natin, so it's the same thing pa rin. Na pagka yung dalawang negative, naging positive, yan. Pag dalawang negative, yung i-add mo, pwedeng ilabas mo yung negative sign, and then saka mo i-add yung two numbers, so negative pa rin yung magiging sagot. Nasundan ba? Kaya yun pa rin po yung equivalent niya using the De Morgan's Law. Hindi siya nabago.
Gets ko na po, ma'am, nakita ko na po.
Any other question?
Ma'am, pwedeng isa pa pong example.
Hindi ko alam, anak, kung meron pa ako dito isang example. Ayan. Wala na, anak. Dun sa, ang tawag dun? Sa module na i-upload ko sa Google Classroom mamaya, parang several examples ang nandun yata. Meron pang word problems na nakalagay. So, pakisundan nyo na lang yon. If in case na hindi nyo maintindihan, mag-chat na lang po kayo ulit sa akin. Okay, mga anak?
Sige po, ma'am.
Okay, so your first task for week 7. Yan, for week 7, ito po yun. Okay? So, using the logical equivalence, you need to supply the reasons. Meaning, from these propositions, titingnan ninyo dun sa law natin kung saan siya na-apply. Okay po. Yan. And then for your learning task number 4, for week number 7, ito naman po siya. This is under PT. Nandyan ba si Hubert at saka si Miko? Mga anak, ha?
Yes po.
Na-screenshot anak yung learning task 3 kanina? Hubert?
Apo.
Ayan. Huwag nyo kadamihan ng pag-send sa akin, ha? Kahit ilan lang, mga anak. Ang importante, itong learning task required for each week plus siguro yung maramihan natin or ilang slides na nandun yung mga mukha ninyo. Okay? Mga 5 to 8 slides lang. Hubert and Miko, ha anak? Mga anak. Ayan. So we'll now proceed with week 8 na mga topics. So first module for week 8 is all about tautologies and fallacies. So as I have told you a while ago, when we say fallacy, it's also under contradiction. Parehas lang po sila. Ano po? Yan. We will establish the tautology or the fallacy. Ano na? Nasa ano? Ayaw nang lumabas ng aking mga objectives. Okay? So with this module number 18, these are the objectives. Dadalawa. So tingnan natin. Again, let's try to recall the difference between tautology and fallacy. So when we say tautology, it's a proposition that is always true. This is the symbol. And it comes from two Greek words, toto or tauto, which means the same, and logi means logic. Ano po? So it's always true for all the propositions. And then for the fallacy or contradiction, which is denoted by an empty set, then it's a statement or a proposition that is always false. Okay, let's try to have this one. So we need to show, to verify that P or the negation of P or Q is really a tautology. Okay? And for us to do that, syempre, we need to have our truth table. Okay? So negation of P ulit, supply natin. Anyone who wants to annotate? Parang wala ako dito. Ay, sabi ko nga. Anyone who wants to annotate for the negation of P? Sino yung dalawang yun? Okay, Uriel for the negation of P. The next column ka, Lance. Yung negation of P or Q, Lance.
Yes po, ma'am.
Go. Okay, thank you, Uriel. That's correct. Then Lance. Negation of P or Q. The disjunction, ano? Okay, thank you, Lance. Lahat sila true kasi nagpo-false lang naman sa disjunction if they are both false, di ba? Okay, for the last operation. Anyone? P. So we will try to compare this column, ha? Itong column ng P or itong column na to. Again, sa disjunction, kailan lang nagpo-false? Kapag ka parehas na false. So meron ba tayong dalawang F? for the two columns natin. True, true. Ibig sabihin true din siya. True, true. Okay. So, anong ibig sabihin?
True po lahat.
Yan. True lahat. Then, it's really a tautology. So, we have verified already that P or the negation of P or Q is a tautology. Okay po? Nasusundan?
Opo.
Okay. How about the others? Okay. Tingnan natin kung meron pa akong example. Okay. Ayan. In words naman tayo, not anymore in symbol. If I follow the school's rules and regulations, then I am a disciplined person. But I follow the school's rules and regulations, therefore I am a disciplined person. Show that the given statement is a tautology. Yan, in words. Paano na yan? We need to use symbols, di ba? Okay, balikan natin. Ano yung mga symbols natin na gagamitin dyan? How many prepositions? Ilang propositions magkakaroon tayo? Anyone from the group? We need to translate that into symbols. Ilan na magiging propositions natin, mga anak? Sa 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We need to let
Dalawa po, ma'am.
yan, 2. And what are those two propositions, Uriel? So let P be what?
I follow the school's rules and regulations.
Okay, I follow the school's rules and regulations. And the next proposition, Uriel pa rin. Continue, anak.
I am a disciplined person.
Okay, and how are we going to denote that? Let that be equal to Q. I am a disciplined person. Okay, so those are our two propositions. So after you have converted the statements into symbols with P and Q, ito pa lang pala. Yan. Ay, ayoko na ng text. Isusulat natin. Okay. Anyone? Paano natin siya isi-symbolize? If, ano itong I follow school's rules and regulations, that is what? Our P, di ba? Okay? So, gumamit siya ng if operator and then, if then operator natin. So, in symbol natin for the two propositions, if, P and Q. Ayan. So, ang una natin, P, then Q. Di ba? Tama ba? Okay, but is also what? Equivalent to and. Ano po? And close muna natin ito kasi if then na to. And, or yung but natin, the same siya ha. But and end. I follow the school's rules and regulations. So that is what proposition? P. Yan. Therefore, ano pag therefore? It's the same as the if-then statement din natin. Therefore, I am a disciplined person. Yan. Ayan po yung symbol ng operations natin for the propositions. Nasundan kung paano mag-translate? If I follow the school's rules and regulations, then I am a disciplined person. So if then statement natin, ito siya. But is the same as and I follow the school's rules. That's the P proposition. Therefore, so ibig sabihin yun yung maging conclusion natin. The result, kumbaga, same as then. I am a disciplined person. Kaya Q. Okay po? Meron ba ako nilagay na table natin for that? Ay, wala. Okay, let's clear muna natin. Anyone who wants to... Okay, ano nga yung symbol natin? If P, then Q. Tama ba? Admit ko lang. And P. Therefore, Q. Anyone?
Tama po, ma'am.
Tautology talaga siya? Hana? Hana, ikaw ba yung umimik, anak? Tautology talaga?
Ang alin po, ma'am?
It's not a tautology? O yung PQ column natin. Establish natin. PQ column ulit. True, true, false, false. Ano ang Q natin? True, false, true, false. Next column natin. If P, then Q. Oh. Sa if P, then Q natin, alin lang yung magpo-false? Ito lang. Diba? All the rest ay true. Okay? Then, ito ng dalawa. If P, then Q, and P. Ito at saka si P. So, siya ay conjunction. Ang nagiging true lang sa kanya ay dalawang true. So, yung una lang ang true. Tama? Sabihin ninyo mga anak ha. Pag mali si ma'am. Yan. True lang sa conjunction natin kapag sila ay parehas na true. Okay? Then, yung last operation natin, if P, then Q, and P, sorry for the writing ha. Then Q. Okay? Etong column na to at saka si Q. If then ulit. Pag if then, false lang ay kapag true, ito, and then false, ito. Meron ba tayo ng T, T, F, 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 T? Wala. So lahat siya ay true. Tama? So it's really a tautology. Okay po mga anak.
Apo.
So pagka ganyan, merong table kasi yan ng different laws para sa tautologies. So hindi ko na pinakita. Sa module makikita ninyo. So titingnan nyo lang yung pinakang main operation ninyo, the whole one. Parang yung kanina sa law, kaninang ginagamit natin sa De Morgan's, ganyan. Kung saan siya papasok dun sa different laws. Base dun sa pagkaka-formulate ng statement. So kung saan siya pumasok, halimbawa katulad nito, since we have established the tautology or the truthfulness of the propositions, makikita ninyo dun sa module na yung sa table ng tautologies, this is under the modus ponens law. Modus ponens. So I will not explain it further ha. Nandun lang siya. Basta titingnan lang siya dun sa table. Okay po? So, ganun po yung pag-establish natin ng tautology or ng fallacy or contradiction. Let's proceed with Module 19, which is validity of categorical syllogisms. Ano naman itong syllogism na binabanggit natin sa Module 19? Okay? So, actually, Module 19 and Module 20, I think I was not able to include Module 20 here. Ano po? But the only difference for Module 19 and Module 20 is that for Module 19, it's on categorical syllogisms, while on Module 20, it's all about arguments. But establishing the validity of arguments is the same as establishing the validity of categorical syllogisms. So for Module 19, here are the objectives. Okay, we'll be using the Euler's. I don't know the correct pronunciation, pero I'm more familiar with Euler's diagram than Euler's. Kasi yung iba, Euler's diagram yung pronunciation niya. Pero sa na-encounter ko, it's Euler's diagram. Ano? Yan. So yan po yung mga objectives natin. So ibig sabihin, for us to establish the validity of categorical syllogisms, we need to use Euler's diagram. And Euler's diagram actually came from Venn diagram or the Venn diagram. Okay, let's try to define some more terms that we'll encounter as we go along with Module 19. The first word is categorical proposition. So when we say categorical proposition, it's a proposition that relates to classes or two categories. And what are those two categories? We have the subject term and the predicate term. And under the subject term and the predicate term, we have the quantifiers and the copula. Okay? So pag sinabi natin quantifiers po, you will encounter the words like all, no, some, parang sa English, ano, yan. And these words specify how much of the subject class is included in or excluded from the predicate class. And for the copula, we are using are or are not. Or ito yung sinasabi natin positive and then the negative. Okay? So, paano po yun? So, this is an example of a categorical proposition. All cookery students are TVL students. Okay? So, as you can see, pag sinabi nating subject term, ito po yun. Yan, subject term yan. And this one, the predicate term. Okay? And then under the subject term, we use the quantifier all. Ibig sabihin lahat. Ano, walang exempted. And then the copula used is the are. So, yan. Identifying the quantity of a categorical proposition, the classification of the quantifier for the categorical proposition is either universal or particular. So, kailan siya universal? Kapag ang ginamit po natin quantifier is all, and kapag ang ginamit natin na quantifier ay some, ang universal is for all or no, kasi lahatan yun eh. Diba? All or no, yun po yung universal natin. But if you use the word some, so mayroong exemption to the rule, kumbaga, yun yung naging particular for the quantifier or the quantity of the categorical proposition. While in the case of quality of the categorical proposition, it's either affirmative or negative. Kailan siya affirmative? Yung sinasabi ko kanina, positive. Kapag ang ginamit na copula ay are, it's affirmative. But if the copula used is are not, or yung merong not tayo doon, and then the quality of the categorical proposition is negative. So to summarize, yung quantifier and qualifier sa categorical propositions natin, we have this one. Okay po? So these are the examples of categorical proposition. So makikita nyo yung first two, universal po siya kasi ang ginamit ay all at saka no. Then the copula used or the qualifier are. So universal sila, and the first one is affirmative and the second one is negative because of no. Okay po. While yung pangatlo at pang-apat, some yung ginamit, so meaning it's particular, are siya ulit, affirmative, are not, negative naman siya. Okay po? So we have summarized here how to classify the quantifiers, the qualifiers, and the quantity and quality of the given categorical propositions. Okay? And usually, categorical propositions are written in standard form in the form of all SRP. All subject, yung subject natin, and then predicate, and then no SRP. So, ibig sabihin, all S, the subject is the cookery students, actually, and the predicate is the TVL students. Kaya, if we will state the first categorical proposition, it is in the form of all P are all SRP. Okay? The second proposition, no SRP. The third proposition, some SRP. And the last one, some P. It should be some P, ha. Ito yun po, ha. Ito ang tinutukoy ko, ha, yung categorical proposition. But this one is just the form. So ito is some P because as you can see on the first, sorry. Ito palang pangalawa ay no P R S. Hindi pala. Magkaiba. Kasi nagkaroon tayo ng middle term natin, yung academic students. Unlike yung first, sa categorical proposition natin, ito yung S, ito yung P. Na-advance ako dun sa categorical syllogisms na tinutukoy ko. Propositions pa nga lang pala ito. So, ibig sabihin, isang statement lang siya na meron lang subject term at saka predicate term. So, ang katulad dito sa fourth nga natin, the subject term ay TVL students and the predicate term is academic students. So, kapag nilagay na natin yan, some S are not P. So, yun po yung 4 forms ng ating categorical propositions. Na sa pagsusulat natin ng categorical syllogisms, we will be using these different forms of or different standard forms of categorical propositions. Okay? So, ano ba yung sinasabi natin categorical syllogism? So, when we say syllogism, it is a deductive argument in which a conclusion is inferred from 2 premises. Kaya pag ginawa na natin siyang categorical syllogism, it's an argument made up of 2 premises. Dalawang premises muna. The first one is the major premise. The second statement is the minor premise. And then the last one is the conclusion. Okay po. Yung may therefore na na-encounter nyo kanina dun sa may logical equivalence, yun po yung magsisymbolize ng ating conclusion, the word therefore. Okay. So, paano na po natin gagamitan yan? So, again, when we say categorical syllogism, we have the terms, yung major term natin, which is the predicate. Major term is the predicate of the conclusion. Minor term is the subject term of the conclusion. Ibig sabihin, doon kayo titingin muna for you to be able to identify your S and your P. Titingnan nyo muna lagi ay sa conclusion. Yung major term is the predicate, the minor term is the subject term of the conclusion, and the middle term is the additional term na mag-a-appear dun sa premises ninyo. Okay? And the parts of any categorical syllogisms are the major premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. Okay po? Okay, tingnan natin itong example natin. These are all examples of categorical syllogisms. Okay? So as you can see here, all leaders are good communicators. All good communicator people are creative. Therefore, all creative people are leaders. So, anong sabi natin kanina para makita natin yung major term at minor term natin? So, titingnan ninyo, this one is your conclusion, yung may therefore, the major premise, yung yan, the minor premise. Ay, tingnan pa lang natin pala. Okay. So, bakit ko nasabi na yun yung major premise natin? Di ba sabi natin, we need to determine first your major term. Anong sabi? The major term can be found in your conclusion, and that is actually the predicate term. So, ano yung predicate term natin sa conclusion? Leaders. Okay? So, leaders. Ano po? And the subject term, creative people. Okay po? So this is the predicate term. This is your subject term. Okay. Ngayon, yung bang predicate term ninyo ay nandun sa first statement. Ayan, leaders, all leaders. Since siya ay nandun sa first statement, so ibig sabihin siya yung major premise. Kasi sabi, the major premise must contain the major term. And the major term is the predicate term of the conclusion. Okay po? So ito ay all S. Yeah. Okay? Yung creative people natin, nasa second line natin. Okay, ito yung P natin. Ano yung ating middle term? Ang middle term natin, good communicators. Symbolize ko na lang ng M ha. Yan, M. Okay po. Nasusunod na. Ayan, nasusunod na ako mga anak.
Yes po, ma'am.
Baka merong hindi ha. Inyo lang pong sabihin sa akin. Okay. So dito po natin makikita yung pwedeng maging mood. Pag na-identify natin yan, dito natin makikita yung mood ng ating categorical syllogism. Okay? So by the symbols used natin, 'di ba? S M P. Okay? So, ibig sabihin ito, papunta dyan, ayan, M, and then doon. Ayan. So, sa module, makikita po ninyo na kapag ganun yung ginamit, saan siya pumapasok na figure. Okay? Hindi ko na masyado di-discuss yan, ha? Ayan. So, ganun lang po yung pag-identify ng subject term, predicate term, the major premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion ng categorical syllogism. Here's another example. Ayan. Okay, so with this second example of categorical syllogism, what is the predicate term? Anong predicate term natin, mga anak?
Yung low income po, ma'am.
Yan, low income. And the subject term?
No Quezonians po.
Quezonians po.
Quezonians lang ha. Do not include the quantifier. So Quezonians lang yung subject term natin. Now, with these terms, the subject and the predicate terms, is the predicate term on the first statement?
Hindi po.
Hindi. Diba? Wala siya doon. So, ibig sabihin, hindi yun yung magiging major premise natin. Okay po? But then again, this is still an example of a categorical syllogism. Okay? Yung arrangement ng statements, mamaya, gagamitin kasi natin siya. Okay. So next sa follow-up lang natin nitong topic na to. Okay? So again, these two are examples of categorical syllogisms. Okay? Okay. So ito yung binabanggit ko ng mga moods sa yan. Once you have identified your prepositions, propositions, so may mga letter name tayo. Kapag ginamit natin ay all SRP, then it is symbolized by A, no SRP by E, some SRP I, some SR not P by O. So ma-identify po ninyo yun doon kapag yan. So katulad nito, tingnan natin itong example. Yan. In-arrange natin siya ha. Parang katulad ito ng example number 2 na hindi siya na-include yung predicate term sa major premise at saka yung subject term natin. Okay? So katulad dito, all high school some creative thinkers are high school students. Okay? All high school students are honest. Ayan siya. And then the conclusion. So di ba sabi nga natin, ang titingnan natin yung conclusion. Ang predicate term natin sa conclusion is yung honest, while the predicate term, the subject term is creative thinkers. So dapat si honest ang siyang nasa unahan. So, saan ba kasama si honest? So, nandito siya sa pangalawa. Kaya pinagbaliktad natin. So, nauna, kasi yun dapat ang ating major premise, yung all senior high school students are honest, kasi nandun yung predicate term natin. Yun na yung maging major premise natin. Then this one, kung saan nandun yung subject term natin, yun yung magiging minor premise natin. Pinagbaliktad natin. Ano po? Nasusundan ako mga anak.
Opo, ma'am.
Yan. Okay. Tapos, paano nang magiging kuha natin for the mood of that? Okay. Let's use yung symbols natin. Okay? So, itong honest, ito yung ating P. Tama? Yan yung predicate term natin. Yung creative thinkers, yun yung M natin. Yun yung S natin.
Opo, ma'am.
Undo. Yan. Ito yung S natin. Anong tawag natin doon sa senior high school students? The middle term.
Opo, ma'am.
Yan, middle term. Yan. So, pag sinimbolize na natin, yan siya. So, ibig sabihin, ito yung conclusion natin ha. Lalagyan ko lang ng line. Yan. Conclusion, ibig sabihin. So, some creative thinkers, ito yung S natin. Ito yung ating P. Okay? Pag nilagay na natin siya sa symbols, yung terms natin, na ginamit ang symbols, all M are P. Tama? Some S R M. I-underline ko to ha kasi tayo ay control U. Ayaw niya. Therefore, wala akong symbol ng therefore. Yun yung tatlong tuldok ha. Therefore, yan. Therefore, some S na. Some S R P. Okay po. So instead of using yung words na senior high school students, honest, creative thinkers, ang ginamit natin symbols. Nasusundan mga anak? Okay. At
Opo.
anong sabi? Ano yung type of categorical proposition natin? Anong type nitong all MRP? It's universal and affirmative. Diba? Kasi all ang ginamit natin, kaya universal. Pag some,
Partial.
particular,
Joke lang.
particular, tapos R pa rin, affirmative. And then sa ating conclusion, some ulit, particular, and then affirmative pa rin siya. Ano po? Yan. Ano yung mga letters kanina nakita nyo do sa table? Balikan ko lang ha.
A at O po yata yung nandito.
E at O ba?
I po pala.
Alin ng I? Pag universal,
A, yung universal affirmative po ay A.
yan. Pag universal affirmative, wait lang. Yan. Universal na affirmative, it's A, capital A. Pag particular affirmative,
I po.
Ay po.
I. And particular affirmative pa rin is I. So, ibig sabihin, ang mood na ginamit ay AII. AII. Okay po yun? So, ganun ang pag-identify ng mood ng categorical syllogism, mga anak ha. Yan. So, bakit ko binibigyan puntos yon? Kasi po, sa inyong learning task, hindi ko alam, yun na yung kasunod. Ay, hindi pa pala, mamaya. Yung learning task ninyo has something to do with finding the mood, the terms yata, parang something ganyan. Right? So, as we continue, let's use the Euler's diagram. So, what is a Euler diagram? So, sa Euler's diagram, sabi nga natin, it was derived from Venn diagram. So gumagamit siya ng circle or oblong just to show the relationship among the sets, the categories, the propositions. Ano po? Yeah. So ito po yung apat na standard categorical propositions. Kapag daw all SRP, ito po yun. Diba? Sa Venn diagram natin. So obviously, lahat nga naman ni S ay included kay P. Pero pag sinabi natin no SRP, so ito yung universal parehas sa lahat ng S ay hindi na kay P. Okay po. The third proposition or the third standard form, yung sum natin. Sum SRP can be symbolized by these Euler diagrams. Okay? Iba-ibang connotations kasi. Ano po? Di ba kapag meron kayo nito, yan. Sum S, ibig sabihin, ilang S lamang ang P. Pwede rin na maging ganito yung symbolism natin. Pwede rin maging ganito. Kasi pag sinabi sum SRP, ibig sabihin, hindi lahat ng P ay S. Tama ba? Parang ganun din. Ano? So yan yung different ways by which we can symbolize or draw the diagram of the categorical proposition that sum S are P. Yan yung three different ways. Yun namang negative niya, yan, ito naman yun. Sum S are not P. Yan, kabaliktaran naman. Parang ito ay dun sa set operations natin ay yung may kudlit sa taas. Tama ba? Yan. O yan. So yan po yung different ways by which we can show the particular negative of the categorical propositions. Okay. So bakit natin to gagamitin? Because we need to show the relationship of the categorical syllogisms, and based from the illustration of using a Euler's diagram, we will be able to determine whether the categorical proposition is valid or not. Okay? So ibig sabihin kung nag-exist pa siya or hindi. So katulad ditong first example natin. All prisms are plane figures. All cubes are prisms. Therefore, all cubes are plane figures. Okay? So saan tayo pwedeng magsimula? Siyempre, lagi tayong magsisimula dun sa conclusion. Okay? Sa conclusion natin, kung i-illustrate natin using the Euler's diagram, so sabi ay all cubes, so let us use C for cube, P for plane figures, and F F for plane figures and P for prism. Okay po? Okay. So illustrating the conclusion. Or sa gusto niyo magsimula tayo sa ano? Sa major premise. Sabi sa major premise, all prisms are plane figures. So ibig sabihin, which one is the bigger circle? Is it the P or the F?
F po.
Yan, F. So yung bigger circle natin. Okay, pasensya na ha. Grade 1 lang po yung nagdo-drawing. So P, and then under ni P, ni F pala, sorry, nandyan si P. Tama? Kasi ang sabi natin, all prisms are plane figures. So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng circle ng prism must be inside the circle of F. Mas malaki si plane figures. Si prism ay part ni plane figures. Sa second statement natin, all cubes are prisms. So, alin ang mas malaki? Si cube or si prism?
Si Prism po.
Si prism. So, saan natin ilalagay si circle ni cube?
Sa loob po ng
Sa loob ni P. Tama? Yan. So again ha, based on the first statement, we have the P and the F, that all prisms are plane figures. On the minor premise, all cubes are prisms. That's also correct. And based on the conclusion, tama ba sa figure natin that all cubes are plane figures?
Opo.
Yes po.
Yan. So, base doon, since tama, using the Euler's diagram, pwede na nating masabi that the categorical syllogisms is valid. Yan. So with the aid of the Euler's diagram, pwede nating masabi that the given categorical syllogism is valid or not. Okay po? And base dun sa figure na sinulat natin, na ginawa natin, it really shows that based on our conclusion, tama dun sa Euler diagram na ginawa natin. Nagkakaintindihan mga anak?
Opo.
Nasundan po ba? Yan. So that's how we establish the validity of categorical syllogism using Euler's diagram. Tingnan ko lang kung meron pa akong another example ha. Yan, meron pa daw. Ayan, ito yon yung kanina. So, yung second example natin, nung introduction natin, So sabi, no Quezonians are lazy. So how are you going to demonstrate that using categorical syllogism? This is under the second standard form. Paano yung no SRP? O paano natin dinodrawing yung no SRP?
Magkahiwalay po na circle.
Magkahiwalay po.
Okay, thank you. Magkahiwalay na circle. So this is our Q and this is our L. Okay? Second statement. Most lazy people have low income. When we say most, we can use some, yung quantifier natin, di ba? Some lazy people have low income. Some M are P. Yan. So, paano natin yon? Some lazy people, o ilagay natin na ang low income ay I. Let's use I for low income. Paano natin i-drawing yun?
Pwede po ma'am
Ano
yung
po?
magtatabi po tapos nasa
Venn
gitna.
diagram.
Paano? Sige nga, Melvin, ikaw daw nga po, mag-annotate ka, anak. Melvin, paano? But how will you relate that with our conclusion? Is having a low income any more related with Quezonians? If that will be the case. Di ba kaya nga sabi natin sa categorical syllogism, ma-establish natin yung relationship. So kailangan natin mapakita dito na having low income is not only related to lazy people, but is also related to Quezonians.
Ma'am, pero hindi po ba parang tama din to? Kasi sabi naman po no Quezonians have low income. So magkalayo pa rin naman po siya kahit dagdagan po ng income po dun sa L.
And most people, some lazy people have low incomes. Kasi tatlo, ay ayan, nag-drawing na si ano. Go Melvin, sige anak.
Mali pa rin po pa.
Ha? Go anak, sige, ilagay mo yon. Kasi the predicate term, thank you Melvin, the predicate, the subject, and the middle term, interrelated sila, di ba? Ano po, interrelated sila. So with the minor premise na most lazy people have low income, so, or yung sinasabi natin some lazy people, so makikita ninyo dito itong part na to, Wait lang. Yan, itong part na to, ito yung sinasabi natin na premise, na minor premise natin that some lazy people have low income. So, ibig sabihin, itong natitira natin, sila yung hindi mga lazy people. Ano po? Tapos, ang mangyayari niyan, base dun sa Venn diagram natin, sa Euler's diagram, with the conclusion na ang sabi ay no Quezonians have low income, yan. So dun papasok yun na dito sa ating, yan. Kasi dapat yung conclusion manggagaling dun sa pinakang resulta nung illustration nyo ng major premise at ng minor premise. Kasi yung punto kanina ni, nakukuha ko yung punto kanina ni Clarence, ni Lance, na, di ba Lance, sabi mo kanina, ay tama din naman po kasi po yung no
Opo.
Quezonians have low income. Again, that is
Mali
your
po, ma'am.
conclusion. Yan, conclusion kasi siya. Ibig sabihin, after you have illustrated your major and minor premise, dapat yung resulting Euler diagram ninyo must be satisfied by your conclusion. Ano? Para bang you have to neglect first your conclusion at the end part or at the latter part ng illustration nyo ng major and minor premise, dun dapat lalabas na makikita ninyo that your conclusion is really valid. Okay po. Dito sa illustration natin ng major and minor premise, lumabas na dun sa low income na mga tao, nasakop siya nung Quezonian. Ibig sabihin, our conclusion is invalid. Okay po yun? Again, here with our example, we need to establish the validity of our categorical syllogisms using Euler's diagram. And kapag ginamit natin yung Euler's diagram, hindi nyo muna kinakailangang tingnan yung conclusion. The conclusion must be the result of the Euler's diagram using the major and the minor premise. Kasi meron tayong mga steps na sinusunod. Hindi ko na lang inisa-isa dito. Pero with the module, makikita ninyo. Pinakita ko lang dito na kapag nag-draw na kayo ng Euler's diagram, makikita ninyo na kung yung conclusion ninyo ay valid or hindi. Unang-una, kaya siya ay invalid dahil hindi niya sinunod yung tamang format, the standard form ng categorical syllogism that it must have first the major premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. Okay po. Question, mga anak.
Wala na po.
Sigurado kayo. Okay na po, ha? Again, they may be examples of categorical syllogisms, but the validity of the categorical syllogism can be established using Euler's diagram. And once you have established that using the Euler's diagram, then that's the only time for you to say that your categorical syllogism is valid. Otherwise, it's invalid. Okay na po, mga anak.
Bale po, ma'am, kanina kaya po dumikit ay kasi po meron pong may low income pa rin po na hindi lazy. Tama po ba, ma'am?
May low income pa rin na
Hindi po tamad.
oo, hindi tamad.
Opo.
Na under siya ng Quezonian.
Opo, ma'am. Gets na po.
Ano po? Yan. So, ito po yung inyong learning task 3 for week 8. Yan. So, ito po yung recorded. Ano po? So, kita nyo na, ay, na-upload ko na ba yung yung WHLP, Yan. So, ito po yung recorded. So, kaya, ito yung mga ano nyo ha, mga gagamitan ninyo na categorical syllogisms. Yan. For number 1, lalagyan ninyo ng ganyan. For each, For number 1, isang ganyan. For number 2, another one. For number 3, and so on and so forth. You need to identify the term, the mood, the figure, and then the validity. Okay, if it is valid or not. Okay po. And then the learning task number 4 actually is not recorded. So, hindi ko na siya isinama. So, ang recorded task nyo pa for week 8 ay summative test number 2. Parang week 7 and 8, summative test number 2. Again, I will upload the link. Sorry for those who are not able to take summative test number 1. Siguro naman po yung 10 days na binigay ko sa inyo na duration nung summative test number 1 ay enough na for you to take the summative test number 1. So hindi na po ako magbibigay ng another link for summative test number 1. Napagbigyan ko na po kayo during quarter 1. So yun na po yun ha. And then you have to do worksheet number 2. So I'll upload worksheet number 2 in Google Classroom. Then yung sagot po ay sa G Drive ulit ha. Wag anak ilagay sa Google Classroom para isang buklatan po kasi siya. And then yung post-test po ay parang I think it's pa rin. It's highlighted in your Google Classroom in the WHLP. So I'll be sending the link ulit ng post-test din. 10 days parehas po ang lapse niyan ha. 10 days ang iseset kong lapse ng summative test number 2 and post-test. After that, hindi nyo na po pwedeng kunin ulit parehas. And that will be the end of our quarter 2 for general mathematics. Anything you want to ask, mga anak?
Excuse me po, ma'am.